Hey everybody, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am one of the senior editors at MyJo in Toronto, and I am back again with another Boris TV tutorial, and this time we're going to be taking a look at another great plugin inside BCC 7, and the plugin that I'm talking about is Pin Art 3D. Now, one comment that I hear a lot from users is they say to me, I don't know where I would use a plugin like Pin Art as, a main effect. Well, one thing that I love about a lot of the plugins in BCC 7 is not only do they work great as a foreground, in your face effect, they also work fantastic as a background effect as well. And Pin Art works great as both. And what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm going to show you how you can create a very cool, and in my case, a very patriotic background that you'd be able to put still images, moving video over top of, and it's just going to help take the project to the next level. Okay, so let me quit out of QuickTime and let me Command Tab into After Effects. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need is we're going to need an element to work with, and I have a Canadian flag here, and I'm going to right click, I'm going to say import, or again the shortcut Command and I on the Mac, Control and I on Windows, and we're just going to import my Canadian flag.targa. I'm going to say open. Now this file has an alpha associated with it, so right now I'm just going to say ignore, and I'm going to say okay. And we're going to take this and drag it down to our create new composition button, so it creates the composition the same size as our element. And what we're going to do now is simply navigate to Effect. We're going to come down to BCC 7 OpenGL, and we're going to select Pin Art 3D. Now, as soon as we do, you're going to see that our effect gets very blocky. Now remember, this is the standard preset for this effect, so we're going to need to do a little bit of legwork so we can get this to look the way that we want. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the size of my pins because I want them to be relatively small. And we're going to bring our master size all the way down to about 16, I think. That's looking pretty good. Now I know you're probably thinking, whoa, well, I can hardly see anything now. Well, don't worry. What we want to do now is add more pins to this pin art effect to make it look the way that we want. So I'm going to come down to pin screen, and you can see that our very first parameter is the density master, and we're going to crank this up. Let's make it about 230, I think. Okay, that's looking much better. So now you can see where we're going with this. Now the thing that's important to keep in mind about Pin Art 3D is that it's modeled after one of those little toys, that you'd keep on your desk that you can basically have all the pins hanging down and you can press your hand into it and it's going to displace those pins to give you a really cool sort of futuristic-y kind of look. And I'm going to show you how to do that right at the end. But what I want to do now is I want to animate this flag because it's looking pretty cool, but there's nothing really 3D-ish about it yet. So first thing that I'm going to do is actually come up here to my 3D discs. I want to make this 3D spheres, just like that. Gives it a slightly different look, and when we add a light to it, I prefer to use 3D spheres because it gives me a very cool look that I really like to use. Okay, so I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom here, and I'm going to come down to noise waves. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some noise waves to this because as you can see, if I click through, it's static right now. So I'm going to come down. Let's put in our amplitude at about, let's say 40. There we go. That's looking good. Our frequency, we'll put it about, 70. The evolve, we'll leave that at 100. I'll keep the auto evolve speed to be 72. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the auto loop to be 10. So basically what's going to happen is every 10 seconds the animation will loop. Basically what we're doing is we're creating a loopable background. So you can see what happens now if I click through is I actually have a waving pin art flag that I can use as a background. Obviously the only thing for me is I'd want it to fill the frame. So let's come back up here and we're going to transform the screen. So I'm going to come in here, we're going to take our center and we're just going to drag it out here a little bit just so that it fills the screen just like such. Okay, so we're almost done, believe it or not. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a light to this shot. Now the great thing with Pin Art 3D is that it can use the built-in lighting of the effect, or you can use the After Effects lights in your composition. So since my effect is self-animating now, I can just come up here and we'll just minimize this a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to Layer, and I'm going to say New, and I'm going to say Light. Now, once I apply the light, and we'll use a spotlight, I'm just going to say OK to that. One thing I do need to make sure of, and let's actually just go back to the effect for one quick second, is that up here at the top, I want to make sure that I'm using my comp lights. So I'm just going to say use comp lights, and as you can see, I can also use the comp camera. So let's just minimize this again. What we're going to do is we're going to take this light, and I'm just going to crank the intensity of it right up, because I basically want to have what looks like a searchlight going across this effect. And we're just going to bring it right down like this. And let's just feather it out a little bit. And you can see the feather looks a little bit different in Pin Art, but I don't mind it. I think it actually looks very cool. And we'll just bring up the intensity a little bit more here. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to position our light over here. Okay, and I'm going to take this and we're just going to stick the point of interest way over here. Now you can see the cone is a little bit too much, so let's actually bring the cone angle down back to about, let's say 35. Okay, much better. And we can just put this about here, because what we're going to do is have it move back and forth across the screen. So we're going to have it start down here. So I don't mind if it's even on the screen a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to add a keyframe for point of interest. I'm going to jump down to the 5-second mark. And we're going to have our point of interest move right across our pin art, just like this. And if I stop, it'll update there. Now I want to have it on the screen a little bit. There we go. And what we're going to do is just have this go back and forth. So I'm going to copy these two keyframes, jump down to 10 seconds. Whoops, let's jump down to 10 seconds, not 1 second. And I'm going to paste this in. And again, we're just going to paste this in one last time so that we're at 20. Now what's important to keep in mind is that I went right to 20 and you'll see the screen went gray. By putting the keyframe in there, what's going to happen is once it gets to 1923, because this is a 24 frame per second effect, basically it's going to go right back to the beginning to that keyframe and make the element loopable. Now the only other thing I want to do here, since I'm making a searchlight out of this, is I'm just going to come in here, we're going to right click, I'm going to say keyframe assistant, I'm just going to say easy ease. So basically it's going to come along like such. It's going to get to here, it's going to stop for just a split second, and then it's going to come back the other way. And I'm just going to preview this here, and you'll see that very quickly and very easily you can create a very cool looking animated background that most people would think that you created in a 3D application, but this animated background was created with the power of BCC 7 and BCC 7's Pin Art 3D. And I think that's good enough, and we'll just play it from here. A very, very cool effect. Now there is one last thing that I want to show you that's actually very cool with pin art. And I said that this is obviously modeled after one of those little things that you can put on your desk that has pins in it that you can press your hand into and displace the pins. But in this case, I didn't displace any pins. I am working in 3D space, but there's no displacement happening. So let me show you quickly how we can displace the maple leaf from the rest of the element. So what I'm going to do is just come to the point where our light is shining directly on our maple leaf. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring back in my Canadian flag here. And I'm just going to say Canadian flag. I'm going to say open. But this time I'm going to have an alpha with it. And what we'll do is we'll just rename this file CF with alpha. And what I'm going to do is take CF with alpha and I'm just going to drop it into my composition here. And you can see that it dropped in right over top, and I'm just going to turn it off for right now because what I want to do is come back to the pin art effect. I'm just going to press F3 on both Mac and Windows, and I'm going to come down to pin FX, and you're going to notice that there's a parameter in here that says use individual FX layers. Now for this pin art effect, we're using the luma, but what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to displace the maple leaf with an alpha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say use individual FX layers. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to drop down the use individual FX layers twirly. And what we're going to do is you can see right here that we have shift FX layer. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to shift these pins out from the rest of the image. So I'm simply going to say, okay, well, we want to use CF with alpha. And what I want to do is I want to use the alpha associated with that channel. Now I can come down to my shift FX parameter and simply grab it and drag it, and you'll see that the pins now displace from the rest of the element. So when they wave, they're all actually going to wave together. But you can see that we have the maple leaf pushed out from the rest of the flag to create another very cool element. Now, what's also important to keep in mind with this is that right now I just have it sitting in place, but I could easily come down here to transform screen, and I could rotate this however I like, just like that, in 3D space inside Adobe's After Effects. So I hope that this tutorial has shown you what a fantastically powerful effect pin art can be, and how you can create not only cool foreground elements with it, but you can also create very powerful, subtle background elements. You know, it's like I always say, if you're a visual effects artist or a motion graphics designer, in many cases, you don't want the client to see what you've done, because that way you know you've done a fantastic job. So if you have any questions, comments, or tutorial requests, you can send them to support@boriseffects.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.